Hello and welcome to episode 98 of the Curling Legends podcast. My guest today is Bob Nichols. If you are listening to this in your car or in some headphones, reminder that you can also go to thecurlingnews.com and follow along with some additional photographs and graphics while you're listening to the show. Bob Nichols is one of the most accomplished curlers to ever come out of the United States, winning the U.S. championships 3 times, appearing in 2 Olympic Games, and winning 2 World Championships. This recording with Bob took place in December of 2023. It was shortly after the passing of Bud Somerville. Bud was Bob's skip in the 1973-74 season when they won the World Championships. Bud himself also a very legendary U.S. curler, and Bob will talk a lot about that relationship, the forming of that team. It also included Bill Strum and Tom Locken at front end. Bob would go on to skip Bill and Tom, adding Bob Cristman. Bob and Bud then reunited, winning the U.S. championships in the 1980-81 season. And we go deep into a whole bunch of USA curling and curling through the 70s. I really, really enjoyed our talk, and I'm sure you will as well. Here is my conversation with Bob Nichols.
Well, I don't know how you had it planned, but what I was thinking that it started off just like talking about how I started curling and kind of grew into being a competitive curler. And before, the days before you really got together with Bud, and then after that, we didn't kind of go walk through years with Bud. And I'm not going to go through every game or every year or whatever, but
Sure.
I'll have to see the highlights, the times we won, and some of the funny things that we had along the line. And so that's a few stories to tell, and so that's my thinking of it. I don't know what procedure is here, but
what I commonly do is I kind of start chronologically, and it's funny, some conversations go that way, and it is kind of tit for tat, like day by day, and sometimes we bounce around.
the way I have it set, starting off at the beginning and then going through the early 60s, and then how we got together, and then starting with the 74 World Championship, and then, I'm not going to cover the year in which we lost, unless you have questions or whatever. But one of the common things here is that especially when I got to arena ice, just about everywhere we went, we ended up issues, which probably today aren't a factor so much. But I'm talking about major changes and affecting the outcome, and a number of them really. And some helped us, some hurt us, but part of the narrative for sure.
Yeah, like, so where were you originally born in and grew up? So you were from Superior, but is that your birthplace or?
Yeah, are you on live now? Or?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I've been recording all this already.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was born in Superior, Wisconsin, in 1948. Both Bud Somerville and I were born on the same day, January 27th. He was 11 years older, and we celebrated our birthdays together for our entire lives, one way or the other. And so, been born and raised here. The only 5 years that I missed living here was when I got transferred to work for Enbridge. And I spent 5 years in Edmonton, my last 5 years as an executive VP up there. I did run into guys like Hector Gervais, and he was on a committee with me back then. I curled with Brad Hunter and leagues a few times for a couple of years. And so I didn't see a lot of people I knew, but at least had the opportunity to meet a few of them.
If you go anywhere that people curl, you're going to make friends. If you're a curler, there's a kinship for sure. Did your parents actually start you in the sport, or were they curlers as well?
Yeah, my dad was a curler most of his life, and before him, his father as well in Superior. So he had a rule that I had to weigh 84 pounds before I could first throw a rock, and at age 11, that's when that magic day happened. And so I started off following his footsteps, and he had one of the original deliveries that I guess goes back to the days when you had to release the rock before the tee line. So there was no such thing as a long slide or that sort of thing back in the days. And so his technique was basically to slide just a few feet and then go down on his knee, and his right foot would then kick up in the air. So I did that for a number of years until I think I talked to Bud, and he got me a regular slider, and and I followed his footsteps and started the tuck delivery. And I did that until I blew my knee out, and that was like in the early 1990s. And then I had to switch to flat foot, which essentially ended my career, even if I had wanted to, because I was not the same player. I was after doing it for so many years. It was tough for me to make the transition. I was lucky to be shooting 80% of what I would normally shoot. So.
It's interesting, the evolution of that tuck delivery. I know it's commonly attributed to Manitobans in Canada for certain. And I remember talking that Don Duguid had sort of developed a kind of a unique one himself that a lot of other players mimic because he was well known as a great player here. So how did that evolve there? And I know there's different, we say tuck and toe, and I actually have some video, of course, of you. I don't know if you've seen it yet on YouTube. Got some of those old games that Mike Chernoff shared. In your dad's generation, they didn't slide. So does anyone remember from the area who was one of the first that really started it and helped, kind of every other people follow?
I think Bud did. I think Bud did back then. He was the originator because he got involved and he got on the national scene back in like 1963. I think was the first time when he ended up getting to the finals of the U.S. Nationals and got beat. But we have a lot of Canadians that come here, and we have a big bond school called Northwest Bond School that's held in Superior and was held for a number of years, and we get anywhere from 64 to 128 teams. So we get a lot of Canadians, especially one of the features of this bond school is we had free food, which was provided by the Y Club all weekend, and then we had free beer the entire weekend. And so with a dance on Saturday night, and so half of our teams were probably mainly from Thunder Bay back then, and that went right through the years. And that's kind of one of the things that kickstarted my career is that we had put together a team back, I think it's 1967, when I started. I started at 11, and normally just played, second or whatever for my dad, but we played in a bond field in St. Paul once, and I think I was 15 at the time, and we lost the first game, and then he turned to me and said, well, no one needs on last rocks, and I said, okay, fine. So we won the next 5 and won the second event. And anyway, that kind of got me kind of intrigued. We didn't have a high school team back then. They did in the other school. There were 2 schools in town, and they had a league and that. But one of the downfalls of the league is if you played in a bond field or playing for prizes and you won something, you couldn't play. Basically, one of their rules. And so I played on a lot of bond fields, including this Northwest bond field.
Oh, so there was like an amateur status for if you were a junior. Was that it?
Yeah, right. And then one of the other problems was that back then, you couldn't compete at the national level. We didn't have junior curling, basically, on the national scene. To play in the men, you had to be 21 years old, and you had to be 21 on January 1 of the year in which you're playing. So for me, that pushed it to 1970 was the first year that I could compete in the competition. So
you just mostly would bonspiel out. You play with your dad. So there was never really any junior curling to speak of. Like you didn't sync up with a bunch of other guys your age necessarily, or like there wasn't a lot of opportunity for that?
There weren't a lot of players. In fact, one of the players that did end up curling in the league from the other school was named Bud Somerville, and he just died, I think, the year before last. And he's one of the famous purple leaders from the Vikings. He's one of the top 50 players in the Vikings history, and he curled.
Oh yeah,
in our club. But the only time that I really got into the gym is my senior year at school. I guess that was 1966, and picked up a bunch of guys, and we went to Chisholm, which is about 10 miles from Hitting. We played in a high school bonspiel. And we played quite well. We got to the finals, and we got beat by a team that was skipped by an 8th grader. His name was Joey Roberts. So that was my first introduction to Roberts. But the story goes on from there in terms of talking about the Roberts situation. Dr. Bud won the world in '65. There's a lot of interest in our club from younger people, 20 to 30 years old, and so our club grew considerably, and there's a lot of new coolers that developed. And one of those coolers was Tom Locken, who I ended up teaming up with later, soon later. He and I would throw a bunch of rocks, and we became very competitive. And he got to the point where we had like training during the summertime, and we would had the keys to the gym because he was a teacher in one of the elementary schools. We'd go to the gym and sweep the corn zone around the perimeter of the gym for half an hour to an hour, and then we'd sweep in place to the point where our arms were just burning off. So he was hooked. So like he could only curl a year or so, and he put together a team to play up and deal with Bonspiel on this good-sized Bonspiel. It was about 1 hour north of us. And Bud Somerville was on the next deal as well as Bruce Roberts. And I had a team which included myself and 3 only curlers. So we won the first 2 games, and then we played a fellow by the name of Dickie Brown in the quarterfinals. And Dickie Brown was the national men's champion in 59 and 62. He was from Hibbing, and he was a well-known curler. I think he played with Goose off and on. And anyway, we beat him. So now we're in the semifinals, and they show up on Sunday morning and look out there, and here they're building stands all around the sides of the arena. And I'm standing there, I said, what's that all for? Well, that's getting ready for the big match. I said, well, what are you talking about? Yeah, I said, Somerville and Roberts are going to play in the final. I said, like, really? So anyway, we go out there and we beat him. Knocked him out of this deal.
Who were you playing in the semi? Was it Bud or Robert?
Bruce Robert.
Oh, right. You were playing Bruce in the semi.
Bruce
Okay.
Robert.
And again, like, what's the combined number of years curling of your team of these 3 guys?
Well, I mean, I had about 7, and they had 1 each. Because it was in
1 each.
It was in November of '67, and the really only full year of curling they had was in '66, following Bud's championship. So,
and so you're about 19. You're about 19 at this point, or?
Yeah, I was 19.
Yeah.
So that kind of started me going, and you obviously got to the finals. First of all, nobody was there. Nobody watched it.
So the stands are empty.
And I think Bud beat us in about 4 ends or something like that. But that was kind of an interesting.
Bruce could not have been happy about that loss, though. I imagine he was a bit grumpy after that one.
Well, like I said, it kind of got us going, and so from that point on, we put a team together in this Northwest Bonspiel, what I was telling you about, and we ended up the following year. We won. In fact, we won that Bonspiel in '68, '69, lost in the finals in '70, and won in '71 and '72. So we had like a 35-1 record. The one loss we got beat by the Harvey Cochran out of Sunday Day. He had to draw the 4th way to beat us in the last hand to win that game.
So even though they were new to the sport, so they didn't come from curling families like you did, your squad, but you got them sort of into the game?
Oh, Bud got him into the game, really.
And Bud as well,
When he won, the interest grew considerably in the club, and that's what we ended up with a lot of athletic young curlers.
Talk about the club for a minute, because got obviously a lot of history that you're a big part of, but that Superior Club, and you even mentioned that your dad was a curler and his father was a curler. And for people actually who aren't even aware, so where Superior, so Superior is actually very close to the Minnesota border, up in the corner there on the water, right?
Right at the head of the Great Lakes, and those Minnesota across the bay. Yeah. Really one community. It's kind of like Thunder Bay, except we're in different states.
Curling must have did it even start even back on the water itself? Like, it was, there's a long history of the game. I guess it goes back within the area. Am I right?
Yeah, originally they had a curling club in like the east part of town, which is where our home is. In fact, the home in Superior that I live in now is my great grandfather built it in 1888.
Oh yeah,
and I've been living within the family for the last 130 some years. And at that time, they had a different curling club. It wasn't the Spirit Curling Club. It was in a different location, and it was called the East End Curling Club. And I don't know that much about it, but I think it goes way back to the 1800s where they were curling. But I don't have a whole lot of history to going back that far as to who played and when, or too much about it. But our club was not new, but I think it was sometime in the 40s, and I think in the late 1950s we finally put artificial ice in. And
so did you first throw on artificial, or did you even start on the natural, I guess, originally?
No, I started on natural, and we didn't even have a lock until we had called a New Year's Bonspiel. So the club didn't even have ice until like the last week of December, and then we played almost constantly from January 1st till early March. Every weekend would be a club bonspiel of some sort that you play in, and it was all crammed into like a 2-month window. And then obviously with artificial ice, then it opened it up to, to moving it back on both ends. So we typically would start in early November and then end up at the end of March.
Is it a thing where curling was known in the community? Like I know, as an example, if you're in high school and you got some friends, they wouldn't be surprised that you curled, would they? Or like, was it kind of, it might have still been a little bit unique, but it wasn't unknown, I guess, in the area, right?
It wasn't unknown, but it really wasn't. It really wasn't like being in Canada where it was so widely played. So no, most people didn't know what it was all about, and so I didn't have a lot of friends that participated in curling. So.
And now for you yourself, though, did you fall in love with the sport immediately? Was it right from that time at 11, or did it take a little while for you to, maybe you played other sports as well? Like where was curling for you in the...
It was right up there. I mean, as a kid, when I started at age 11, when I was cutting grass, I had 45 lawns that I cut in the summer and went through about half dozen lawnmowers in those early years, just wearing out because, so I didn't get a chance to play like baseball or golf much back then because I was busy working the whole time. I played some football, although I really wasn't very big. Back then, I was senior year, I was like 140 pounds, 145 soaking wet. So we had a super team, and I lettered in it. But and then when we combined the two schools, we had track, and we never had track before at the other high school. So we set a whole bunch of records in the 80 relay, and in my senior year, and went to state and that sort of thing. But that was the extent of it. And so we really became curling and golf as my life progressed from that point on. And yeah, I was hooked, and I had the desire, again, going back, maybe starting with that one bounce bill that that gave us the initiative to keep trying harder. And other thing that helped me, I think in 1970, Bud was invited to the tournament champions called Manosphere, and that was in Winnipeg. And El Gagne, who was playing with him at the time, couldn't make it, so Bud asked me to play there. So we flew up to Winnipeg and played. And in fact, I just looked at the booklet that I got from that. The guys that played in this were Bernie Richardson, Ron Northcott, Don Dukas, Lyle Dagg, Elfie Phillips, Victor Juvet, Jerry Bronstein, Bud, Matt Baldwin, Geraldsworth, Doug Wankel, Rod Pickering, Herb Mann. So I got to really to see the best of the best right off the bat. And
that was your first time. Was that your first time curling with Bud?
It was, yeah. Yeah, we're always playing against them. I graduated from college in 1970, and I remember at the end for placement you had to draft a memo or letter talking about yourself and your goals in life and that. And I still have it where I said back then that my goal, I have a clear goal in the field of accounting, which I was majored in, and I said, but I have a personal goal to be a world curling champion, and that it was locked in right then in 1970 that was my goal. And whether I did it with Bud or whether I did it by myself, I had the tools and you certainly had the initiative to try to get to that stage. And
what was I reading somewhere? Was it the thing that you wrote? Oh, maybe it was. I think it was in the book about the Superior Club. So you were a Bud Somerville fan as a young curler. As he's making his mark, you're following him. And it was the Nationals, I think, maybe that he lost one year.
Yeah. Back in 1963, they had the U.S. Nationals were held on the Duluth Trailing Club, and Bud represented Wisconsin, and he and his dad and Jack Horse and Bill Strum, who was Bud's brother-in-law because they both married sisters. And they got to the finals, and I watched the game, and they really very close games throughout. And in the eighth inning, came from Michigan, Harvey's name is Schleizak. He had a rock. He was one of the leads through the rock, and it visibly was out of the ring. So the whole end, they ignored that rock, and then he decides to blank the end, and they say, oh no, I want to measure this rock. Well, wouldn't you know, the circles are off, and they awarded it one rock to Michigan, and that's what lost the game. It was a heartbreaking loss for him. It's like I was able to watch that, and Bud's dad was quite good. He and my dad were similar levels of competition, but he played for him, and of course Tom, he was surely new at the time to the curling, and they did well, but that was the first real national scene for Bud to be in. And I think it just made him try that much harder when he years the taller, and that's why he kind of fought every year to win that and to get into the world.
As you're coming up, particularly in that club, Bud's the target. That's the goal. I want to reach that level. And if I'm having any chance to play against them, I want to beat them. And you're the young player coming up. Of course, you had that opportunity in that final when probably a little bit before you expected at 19, and he cleaned up pretty quickly, like you say, in four ends. Now, was that, but he knew, did he know of you? So when you're 19 and you're skipping against him in that final with the stands empty, when he's supposed to be playing Roberts, he knows who you are at that point, I'm assuming, and like he knows your dad, like there's
sure. We played each other in the club all the time. Again, I had since I was 11, and I was just a young kid, obviously. But he wasn't that old either. I mean, he was only 11 years older than me. So
he showed talent pretty young as well, right? Like he was early on one of the best curlers in the United States.
Yeah, and he was probably not only just in curling, he was an exceptional athlete in a number of ways, but he had a heart murmur, what they thought was a heart murmur back when he was young, and his dad wouldn't let him play sports, football or basketball or whatever. And it wasn't until later, when we'll talk about later, but in '78, when he had spinal meningitis, and then they thought that he had a leaking heart valve, that they discovered that it really wasn't a leaking heart valve. It was a baby valve that everybody has in that birth that's supposed to shut. And that baby valve never shut tight. And so his whole life, blood was leaking from that part of his heart. And so they just went ahead and sewed it up, and he was fine,
But as a kid,
he was a good basketball player. He was a good golfer. He shot his age in golf at 69, and he's just an exceptional athlete.
Natural athlete.
He might have played baseball.
But as an example, because of the heart thing as a kid, curling became a very viable sport because not as much cardiovascular activity is not pushing the heart so much, and the fact his dad was a curler probably didn't mind having him on the ice with him. As you say, he was talented in everything he did.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. We played racquetball later in life, and he was one of the best racquetball players in town too. So.
And was he very competitive generally too, like even in a fun game, or did he mostly kind of focus that on the big games?
No, I think he and I are very much alike. I mean, I guess I don't look at myself as being competitive, but I probably can't play a game of cards without being competitive. I just. Everybody that I know looks at me and say, "You're not competitive. What do you mean?" That's so. Yeah, I don't like losing.
What's the card game, by the way? For the Somerville team and the Nichols team, what was the card games generally at the Superior Club?
Well, we around the club we play snare a lot, or gin rummy, or like we had a poker club that my dad actually started, and I invited Bud to join us, and the older people that we played in that. We couldn't lose a lot of money. The most you could lose was like $10 a night or whatever it was, but got together every other Thursday or something like that for the summer month or the winter months rather, and we play nickel dime poker and that sort of thing.
You get 4 players on a team, and there's if you're bonspieling, there's always a lot of spare time, and cards is one of those things that can come out for sure. Good thing to do while you're sitting around waiting for the next draw. Better than drinking too many Ryan Cokes or
Right.
You want to be prepared for the next game. It's okay to have a couple, right? But not too many. Yeah, it's a shame then. So you never really had like a national junior to play for or a state junior champ. That never really materialized for you as a young guy then, right?
Well, they did. In fact, I have a cousin that's 4 years younger than me, and he was a decent curler, and he played in the high school competition. And when he went through the playdowns, somebody squealed on him and said, "Hey, he played and won a toaster or something and won bonspiel, and he got disqualified."
Okay,
that's
really?
kind of what we were putting up.
So, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So in your case, that might have been an option, but you were already in the bonspiel circuit, and that was, you'd already done some of that.
It just wasn't worth it. To be honest with you, it just wasn't worth it to play high school because there was wasn't enough to play for, and the level of competition wouldn't be anywhere near what we'd play against Bud and everybody else. I mean, in our club, we didn't do them very often, but one year with my dad, we won the dual superior championship. So between both clubs, we won. It's called Marsh McClellan Trophy, and I think that one year, my dad always said, "Well, that was the year Bud won the world, so he didn't play." But we beat everybody else.
Well, that was Bud's first national as well, right? When they won the Worlds?
The national, he was in the national in '63. That's where he lost the finals. But then got into the world until 65.
In 60, yeah. So they went.
That was his first.
Yeah, and wins that first nationals in 65, and then actually wins the first world championship for the United States. What do you remember about when they got back, and what, like, how would you even follow that at the time? It's
Well, it was unbelievable because there was thousands of people that showed up at the airport for him, and they had parade down both cities, and they got a lot of notoriety. But they went to the White House, and after that, Bud was on a show called "To Tell the Truth." I don't know if you ever heard of that, but he was one of the contestants that everybody had to say, "Well, my name is Bud Somerville, world champion or whatever," and then the people would vote to see, well, who's the real Bob Somerville, that sort of thing. So,
was there any TV coverage that you were able to get at the time, or what was the coverage like of, say, a Nationals or a Worlds? It was none really, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was more the news reporters and just for that. No, that's fantastic for curling, because I mean it's hard to understand or maybe appreciate what was the context of curling in the 1960s, but there was and the World Championship itself was quite new. Even the first couple of years was just an exhibition between Canada and Scotland, and frankly, Scotland wasn't much of a match. But you fast forward 5-6 years, and all of a sudden now you've got more countries in it, and everyone's getting better. Your area already had great curling, and as you say, there was opportunity to match yourself up against some of the different Manitoba and Northern Ontario teams. I guess probably predominantly because there wasn't a lot of travel back then in the 60s. Right. As you say, later on when you got to go to that Winnipeg Spiel, there was that occasion that have these bigger events. Did they ever have, like, I know because car spiels were something that had sort of started in Western Canada. Did they ever have like a car spiel in the U.S. that you recall, or did you ever travel up to Canada for one over the years?
No, here with car spiels. We did go to Thunder Bay and play in the Grand Prix, which was one of the majors back then, and that was right after we joined our team together. I mean, we're getting ahead of ourselves here, but I mean, I'm talking about 74 and 75, and I don't know. They always had Bonspiel, and the Thunder Bay Bonspiel or whatever, and we won money up there many a time, but we definitely had the influence of Canada, the border that close.
So Hibbing, let's talk about Hibbing for a moment. You mentioned that Bonspiel where you were the spoiler beating the Roberts team, but I imagine then there was a pretty good rivalry that was just developing, I guess, just as you were kind of coming into your own. But it had already begun, I guess, between Somerville and Roberts. And was there, I'm assuming you guys would commonly go to the last chance spiel in Hibbing as well. That was always a big kind of year-end Bonspiel.
Yeah, it was, but I guess the majority of times that I went there, that was the end of the year, and you kind of wanted to let loose more than anything else. I mean, you wanted to win, but it was really more, let's go up there and have a good time kind of thing. And when you walk on the ice, I mean, you don't want to win, but we had a few beverages during the off time.
Oh yeah, well, I played in it twice. I went down when I was kind of in my early 20s, and yeah, I mean, we would just go down it was a fun event to be at, and like you say, you'd have Caesars or screwdrivers first thing in the morning on trays, and but it was great. I mean, I had so much fun down there. Even at the time, I didn't recognize the history of it. Went back decades. A lot of the teams that would come out, probably teams might even try out new teams as ahead of the following season. And I guess with that, so you playing that Bonspiel with Bud. That's your first time playing with him. Like you hadn't played with Bud as a team.
Playing with him, yeah, right.
Now, how would it work? You guys would actually win the state and then represent the state at the Nationals? I think back then, right? That's how it would generally work.
Back then, and it was a long path. First, you had to get out of your club, and we typically have 8 teams probably playoff. And with the club we had, our club was probably better than our state, to be honest with you. So I actually lobbied a couple of years later and then you go to a district, and then 2 teams there's 4 districts out of the state, and then the top 2 teams would go from there to the state. So you had 8 team state spiel. And so I said, one year there was like not enough teams to even get a district. I said, wait a minute, we're playing 8 teams vying for one spot. I said, if you have more than 4 or 5 teams, you should get two entrants to the districts. And they accepted that. And so instead of getting 1, you got two teams came out of my club. But, that like the years in which we won from the club through the national, we were I think in 74 we were 27-1, and in 78 we were 28-0. And the only team that beat us in 74 was 4 finalists in Southern Wisconsin that they actually wore boots on the ice, and I mean, it was one of those games that they had a really interesting play, and we'll be laying 4 or 5, and all of a sudden they make this shot, and you get in there, we couldn't get them out, and that sort of thing.
Do you remember the name of the team? Do you remember the name?
No, but I remember the boots. Always had a kick out of lot.
I think everybody in that era had a story like that, right? Where there's some team that you look at and go, I'm not sure how we should lose to them, but you do. And at every level, right, it could happen. There was, because if the skip makes the last shot, sometimes it's tough to win when they make everything. Well, okay, so take us back. So you're skipping your team. So you were always coming up, then you're skipping right from when let me rephrase that. Your dad probably skipped and had you throw the last rocks, right? Is that what he did?
After a while, I started off, obviously, starting off at second or whatever it was. But yeah, and then I got my own team. And I actually skipped my whole 2 last rocks. Other than the 4 years with Bud, my whole life was throwing last rocks. So, because I played third for Bud for 74, 5, 6, 7, and that was the end of that. So,
Bud pulls you up to come to the Bonspiel in Winnipeg. But then that was what? That was 67, right? I think. So you're still...
No, that was 70.
Oh, that was 70. Sorry, that's right. Sorry, you're 70, but that's still That's still 3 years away from joining up with him. So you're still butting heads with him in the club and in the playdowns. In those early years, when you're skipping against them, how would you guys generally do, and what were those matches like?
Yeah, we were close. Like we'd be tied up coming home most time, and it'd be just a shot here, shot there. 1970 was the first year that I was able to play, and he beat us. And then the following year, I beat him in 71. So he was knocked out. And then in 72, in the fall of 72, he approached me and Tom Locken and said, hey, like to get a team together and be you and I and Bill Strum, and with the caveat that I would be playing shooting third, and Bill would have to move down to second. Well, that didn't go over too good with, especially his wife, who objected strongly to that, thinking that was a shot in the butt or whatever. And so he said no. And so Bud just said, forget it, I'm not going to play. So he that year he didn't play.
Oh, really?
And then finally the year after, that was it. I played, but he didn't.
So you get Bud and Bill, and they're married to sisters, right?
Right.
Let me get this straight. And yet he's wanting to form this super team. He sees that you and bring you in on the team and get you and Tom, but Bill says no, and their whole team doesn't. So or Bud himself just steps away.
Yeah, that was just the 1 year.
That's interesting, though. Okay,
that was 73. So just the 1 year. Although Bill did play, and Bill actually beat us in the club with the team, and then he went on. But we happened to have the state in our club that year, and he got to the last game, and he missed a wide open draw to lose to one of the guys that played with me. It was from a different town. He had moved to Green Bay, and that team then went on to win. So it was basically Bud stepped out of there for a year, and then we got together.
Okay. Yeah.
And then what happened was, I mentioned it too. We used to go to this Grand Prix. Well, so that was like in November of 73 for the 74 season. We go up there. We haven't thrown a rock yet. Our club didn't even have ice yet. And we win the Bonspiel.
Oh, but sorry, is the team formed, or you guys or what's the?
No, we formed the team, in the fall of 73, and we'll go to Thunder Bay. Hadn't thrown a rock. We're playing Jack Mirror. We're playing Savage. We're playing all the top teams in Canada, and we go straight through and we win. And that was the kind of the start of our season. And then we won. You mentioned we won everything except the one game at the state. We were 59-1 going into the World Championships that year.
Bill had played third for Bud for years. They'd had great success. I guess I'm interested to understand. So when your Bud had in his mind the team he wanted, and it didn't happen that first year, Bill goes on his own, actually has a bit of success. And then I guess he, the next season, said, okay, I'll give it a try. Like, was he all in, I guess, before that Bonspiel in Thunder Bay?
Yeah,
or was he?
I think it was more his wife who was saying no, to be honest. I really do. I think that I think Bill would have been happy to go with. And to be honest, he should have moved down to lead. And then not being a put down, but his strength was the draw game. And Locken, Tom Locken, who played with us, his strength was the hitting game. So obviously, you'd want your touch player to play lead, not second, and it was backwards. So, but then going.
There was a lot of egos attached to positions sometimes, right back in that era, and I think success often came with the ability to get someone who could, like Bill Strum could skip, but he was willing to play second. I mean, now you've got an advantage over some of these other teams that don't have a player that good at second. And I guess Tom, when Tom was playing with you, where was he? What rocks was he throwing with you on the team?
He played third. He was the third, moving down the league, basically.
Great player. It's always tough now. So when you do form that team, though, there's 4 other guys that don't get picked. I guess that's always tricky. I mean, what's that? Do you recall at the time how that goes? I mean, it's a tough part of that, right? You step away from friendships and guys that you've played with.
Bug's team was pretty much divided anyway, because the front end of El Gagne and Tom Wright, El Gagne, for work purposes, he was transferred to Omaha, Nebraska, and so he was playing for Nebraska. And Tom Wright, he operated, and his career was pretty well done by then. So that wasn't an issue. We were all still friends, obviously. At that time, nobody really had any hard feelings whatsoever about us getting together. So it really was a good match.
So that 73-74 team, you play in Thunder Bay. It's early in the year. You win the Bonspiel. Now, question, because I always like to ask about this. Did the Calcuttas, which were always pretty popular in certain areas, but I don't know, did you guys actually have Calcuttas down in Wisconsin and in the Bonspiel circuit there, or was that something you experienced in Canada?
They did have one in Thunder Bay. Thunder Bay had the Calcutta.
Did you buy yourselves when you went up there?
I don't think so. I don't think we had enough money to buy that stuff.
Well, it's funny though, right? Because oftentimes you could make more in the Calcutta than you might in the Bonspiel.
Yeah.
So you've just tested yourself against a pretty good field. When you guys won it, did it seem almost like easy, or was like you guys played really well? Like you just clicked right away?
Well, I think we just clicked, and it seemed an easy transition for me. I mean, I was not used to throwing third rocks, but I being a skip for one thing, I think one thing Bud also liked about having me, I was in the head. I could judge rocks and judge sweeping probably as good as anybody, and so he never had any concern about me, messing up on the call. And he was the ice reader more so than I, but call and shot. I mean, we seemed like we just like a glove. It fit just like a glove. That we got along good, and I think one of the big things about not only that team, but I think all these teams are what the difference between winning and losing isn't like putting 4 people together. It's putting 4 people together that like themselves, like each other, and are friends, and don't need to be worried about getting them stabbed in the back or whatever. Because when things are going good, everybody's having a great time. But at some point in time, when you put what might be an all-star team together, one thing things starting to go bad, that's when all of a sudden it just falls apart. And we never had that issue with any of my teams. I mean, that's the one huge advantage we had over teams. We were all best friends.
So if you got knocked out early in a Bonspiel, there wasn't any pointing fingers, and you just
well, we didn't get knocked out very often.
Didn't happen too often.
Obviously.
Well, I wanted to ask you too, because you're coming at it. You've been skipping for a lot of years. You're calling the game. Did you just defer to Bud, or would he sometimes ask your thoughts, on shot choices or anything, or like what was that dynamic like in the house?
Yeah, we would talk. And this is one of the other things that I don't like in watching the modern day play. We didn't expect to want to hear anything from the front end unless we asked them for it, and so they wouldn't be squawking about, no, you're playing the wrong shot, you need to do this or whatever. That never happened. And I still think that's a real negative for some of these teams that I see. Too many cooks in the kitchen sort of thing. I think, you got to have the third and the skip have to, make those decisions. And sometimes we're in games where we were down by 3-4 points, and we said together, and we said, hey, we're going to all hang out with our terminology. So, we're gambling. We're saying, we're going to try to get it back in the game by getting a big end or whatever, knowing that it might be the last end if we screw up. But sometimes you have to do that. So.
Was your style generally to play fairly conservative and just, or try to get up and then keep things simple? What was, how'd you, I mean, that was pretty common in that era.
That's the difference between me and Bud. And it's also the difference between Bud and Robert. Bud, and that's why he was so successful back in the years of Vinnie Richardson and Douglas or whatever. They were all hitting teams. And they'll be the first to say that was their strength. Douglas' strength was, he was a hitter. They didn't get into the draw game much, and you always have to make a draw here and there, but that's not the game. They get up 2 points, and they, basically they get control and they win the game. Bud, going way back, he was always a come around, and he had Bill Strum, who was a great draw man and bailed him out a lot of tough situations. But making that free, they had to have, and that's what curling was all about. You got certain shots in the game, a lot shot. You can shoot 50% and win every game if you make the right 50%, basically. You can have a lot of half shots not going to kill you, for instance. Yeah, hit and roll out typically, but if you get in a situation where you have to make the shot either as a skip or like the third miss of it, you have one opportunity to get into the rock and play and you don't get it, they got it up and you're done. I've always felt that, currently is, when you look at pure stats, it doesn't tell the whole story. It's a game of key shots, and we focused on that, and it was a changed transition with me. But Bud chewed last rock, so he knows he can make that draw to the 4-4, draw to the pot, or do whatever. He had that confidence all along, and so as long as he had the confidence, that was good enough for me. So it wasn't until after he left that we switched back to more of a hitting game, more of a game in line with Roberts, where his game and our game were pretty much the same.
So when you were skipping, because that's sort of, you guys flipped that a bit, right? Where when he got back from his health issues and he would call the game and you'd play, you'd throw the last rocks, right? For a bit, is that how you guys did it?
Yeah, when he came back,
like he would play more a bit to yours. Like, was your strength more of a hitting game, or was that just the way the game was going a little bit? What do you attribute to that sort of shift a little bit?
No, I don't think. I think Bud entrusted me in making either. I mean, I preferred to keep it, wide open in that for the most part. But and like I said, once you got the lead, I was pretty much, we're going to outget anybody, and so if you're up like you get a good lead, you're not going to miss any shots, and we're not going to let anybody talk in the game. But if you continue to play the draw game when you got a lead, that just lets the other team back in. They have a chance to get back in the game again, and that's something that I didn't let happen.
I know we're bouncing around a little bit, but just since we're on the topic, the game was still evolving, and it wasn't that easy to make shots. I mean, it wasn't sort of the hitting prowess and the conditions of the late '80s, early '90s when the game changed. But in 1981, in your World Final, you lose 2-1, and it doesn't show me what the line score looks like, but I'm assuming, though, that was a fairly open game. Maybe not to what you were intending to do, but that's sort of how it turned out. What do you recall from that final? And
they're jumping around, and I guess you a bunch of stuff in between, but we can jump around. That's fine. If you're talking about 81, one of the things that I mentioned in Bud obituary thing, I think he had a son who had cystic fibrosis, and he was in late stages of that. And when we went to London, Ontario to play, this son got with, and he had to be hospitalized, and so it was in the middle of the competition. So there's a lot on his mind, all the way through this. Some of it, what happened is, first of all, we go to London, and we're supposed to play at a different arena, the arena where we originally played, but they had won their hockey championship or whatever, and had a playoff game that week. 1 or 2 games had to be scheduled there, so they moved us to a different club. I think it was the Thompson Arena. Well, the first thing that they found out is that the hockey ice floor was 7 inches higher on one end than the other.
Oh no!
7 inches. Okay, so now they're going to make curling ice level. So you got to put at least an inch on the one side just to get ice, and then the other side you're going to end up with 8 inches of ice. And what happened, well, we kind of cottoned on to that early on. I remember playing Canada at the time, Burtnick, I think we played. And throwing a rock going downhill was at least 10 feet faster
Oh, really?
than going the other direction. Yeah, it still wasn't level. I mean, it was playable, but it was not level. Well, we get to the finals and we got to play Switzerland, and against it was like 77 degrees. This is like in early April, I recall, outside, and it had rained, and so people were coming into the arena with coats on that had moisture on them, and the combination of the heat from that, the heat from the lights being televised on live TV around the world, the final, after one or two ends, I think it was even the second end, he came up and told Bud and I, said, "Hey, the ice is going out on us."
Oh, no. Yeah.
And they gave us a whole bunch of towels, and we, just water on the rocks. I mean, the rocks were sweating, basically. So that we'd have a towel, wipe a rock off, and shoot. Well, I think we got down to about the third or fourth end, and Bob Buchanan, our lead, he's trying to throw a corner guard or whatever it was. He hits one of these puddles in the middle, and it just stops in the middle of it. Everybody's looking in the stands, say, "Boy, what happened there?" Well, that was the start of it just going out completely. So soon after that, after the fifth end break, I mean, we were really, I think, stupid. We should have just said, "Hey, this ain't going to happen. We're not playing anymore." We should just, what are you going to do? You're on live TV. You got all the different going on. So we had to switch. We couldn't use the center. You had to use near the board, about 3-4 feet from the board. The only thing that was frost, but it wasn't melted. The whole middle of the seat was wet. You could not throw a rock down or a draw shot or put any rock in the middle.
Yeah.
So when we say 2-1 hitting game, well, it wasn't because it was just you couldn't play on it.
Couldn't play on it. Yeah.
There was only one great shot. Air Canada made a cross the sheet double on about the sixth end where we were laying two, and we ended up the score was 2-1, and that it was too bad because it wasn't a game. It really was. You can say it's the same for both, but I mean I don't care. It's just
the score is not conducive of a strategy. It's just conducive of unplayable conditions and making the most of it because there's not much other choice. And it's too bad because starting to get some TV coverage, like you're getting actual, curling's growing in some exposure, and it's not a great moment. I remember, actually, I don't know if you recall this. Remember when Fenson, they did a thing, this is years ago, but they did a thing in New York at the Rockefeller Center, and they had a curling game. And I think Fenson played, and I can't remember who he played against, but not near the importance because it's not a world championship, but it was sort of this big highlight. They're going to showcase the game, and it was awful because the conditions were just atrocious. So it's kind of a weird thing about curling, right? You kind of need, and we talked about it right at the beginning, you need good conditions, and that's probably the one thing you guys suffered with, I think, a lot through your era was trying to, when you had great conditions, great shot making was rewarded, and you could have great games. And like you say, it's strange how clubs generally offered the better ice than the arenas, but you got to put people in stands, and you want to create the environment. Nowadays it's sort of the opposite. But let's go back because that 73-74 year, that's that kind of that breakout season for that team.
We can cover one more thing on 1981. There's a couple funny things that happened.
Sure.
One of the first things is our driver happened to be Don Milroy, and he drove out of St. Paul, but he was originally from Superior, and he was the CEO of a company that was headquartered in London. So he was our driver, and he kept us in stitches the whole. So I mean, he was a funny guy. And for instance, he said before the drivers went out to pick up their teams, they said, "We want every one of your drivers to drink sparingly." So we said, "Yeah, that's fine." So he said, "I went to the first bar and I ordered sparingly, and they didn't have any. So I ordered a brandy Manhattan instead." And then one night we took it to the Sun Club. He lost the car. He didn't know where he parked the car. We were going around. So that's part of it. And then the Tom Wright, who played with Bud, we talked about him earlier, and he was really a super guy. And he, in all the years, he was raised when we went to the World and even the Nationals. He'd go around and raise money from all the local businesses to help us, finance our costs during that. So we had opportunity in '81 to bring a coach, well, and a fifth man. Well, we chose not to bring a fifth man, but we did bring him as a coach. So what they had during the week, throughout the week, is at the fifth end break, they told all the players that there's sandwiches in the locker room for everybody. Well, Tom, Tom Ryan, he was like about 6'2", 6'3", 350 pounds, if not more. And so he'd go in and instead of talking to us, the fifth end break, he'd go in and get a whole bunch of sandwiches, stuck them in his jacket and walk back. And he was able to sit in the coach's spot right behind the sheet and everything else. And so anyway, we're in there, and one of the guys that ran the locker room comes up to Bud and said, "Bud, you got to tell your coach that he can't eat any more of these sandwiches. There isn't enough for anybody else." Bud says, and right then, Tom walked in the door, big Tom, and he says, "You tell Tom that he can't eat these sandwiches." He turned and he says, "I'll order some more." So
yeah. So as a coach, he wasn't really required for coaching purposes, but it was nice to have him there. And he
no, we bought him because he raised all his money for it. So anyway, we get to this Friday afternoon, and we have to play Italy, or we get to this Friday morning. We have to win the game to make it to playoffs. It was do or die for us. And so Bud turns to Tom and says, "Tom, you've been watching all week." I said, "No." "You've been watching Italy at all?" He said, "Yeah, I've been watching." He says, "They can't hit a rock." I said, "Really?" "Yeah, they're terrible." So Bud goes out there, the first four ends, we play the guy. They never miss a rock. They hit every rock. So he turns to me and says, "I think we're changing our strategy." So he switched to a draw game. In 3 ends, we beat them by 5. We walked off the ice.
So that was the one coaching tip that that you guys used.
Yeah. So anyway, it was funny.
Yeah, I read your write up. I'm assuming that was at the memoriam. You shared that. Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, I was going to ask you: is it something that you had posted or would want to have public? Like, I would only use it if like I could post it sometime.
No, I'm more than welcome to use that.
It's really nice and really well written, and I mean the thing with his son is just incredible. I mean, we all watch sports too, right? And of course, you've competed at an incredibly high level, but you watch it as well, and there's not always an appreciation that these athletes are going through other things. There's been stories about, Norman in 96 that, actually there was some other stuff going on, or LeBron in 2011. Like there's stuff still goes on in our lives. They're all people. And to imagine that here's Bud, dealing with this news in this situation and then trying to compete and win a world championship, it must have been something. And as a team, I'm sure you guys really rallied together with him. I mean, it must have been really tough.
Well, we did, it really affected some of the other teams, to be honest with you. Some of the teams knew what we were going through, what Bud was going through in particular. I know when we played Norway, Christian Thorm, we go back because he's the team we ended up beating in Winnipeg in the finals. I think it affected them as much as it affected us. And I think we played them in the semifinals and we beat them pretty handily. But I just sense that they too knew that this is more than just winning a stupid game. There's a life event that's affecting, it's much bigger than that. And it affected a lot of people. And he finally did pass. He died 3-4 months later, and it was a long struggle. And then Bud started a cystic fibrosis fund bill to raise money for the research and stuff, and it's still going on. This was from 81 till now, and they've raised something like $400,000 from that bond sale that's been given to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation in his memory. So that was going to be a positive thing as well. Anyway, if you want to go back to 73, we can talk about that.
So it sounds like the dynamic between you, as we said, you and Bud were hit it off. It's interesting. I wonder, like, how did you, even before you start that year, then how are you approaching it in your head? Like, did you consciously think about, okay, well, like, because you don't know if it's going to work. I mean, maybe the dynamic won't be there. But did you consciously prepare almost, or it just sort of happened so naturally, and you guys it just hit off so well that there wasn't really much to think about?
I will say that first year in particular is the first year where we really put everything we had into it, and to the point where, I mean, we used to having a few beers, after curling or whatever, and we purposely, we just, had one, went back to the hotel and just got a lot of rest and sleep and all the way through. I can't say all my teammates did that, but I know Bud and I did.
And that wasn't that common in the 70s. Let's be clear, right? I mean, that wasn't always that. Sometimes that was harder to do than sticking around and having a few drinks.
Well, you mix, trying to mix, pleasure with, so also it was a job. And to me, it was a job. I had a mission. I can't say I had that mission my whole career, but that first year, that first world championship that was on our agenda, it was like work. I mean, we made it priority, and we weren't going to let anyone get in our way. So that's how I approached it.
Well, did you guys practice? There was always a lot of games played, but was there practices, or did you guys just throw and stay sharp? Like, what kind of things would you do? And then with that team in particular?
Well, we all practiced, but the one thing that would hurt us, and me in particular, is with that puck delivery. A lot of strain goes on your left knee between that and sweeping, if you are sweeping. So I constantly had knee problems. And when we did get it to the nationals, where you're playing 2 or 3 games a day, I wasn't able, but between games, I was going back to the hotel and having a hot bath and then have ice packs. I talked to the doctor about it. I said, well, the best thing to do is go hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold, and get blood flowing into that area. And so
even in the early 70s, like you had already started having a bit of knee trouble early on.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And so we did practice, but we had limited because of the knee issue. And Bud too. And Bud had knee issues. Locken and Strum didn't have it so much, but we did. But Locken, he's probably 2 more rocks than any of us combined. Again, going back to his, he went from 0 to 100 in 1 year. He didn't want to go back to 66 and 67 when he started taking the game up, and it proved out for him that he made it work and became a great player. So,
and one thing on that, I wanted to ask you, because I've asked this of a few, sort of third skip combos. Was there ever a moment where, and maybe that first year, maybe later on when with you and Bud, where you talked him out of a shot, or I don't know, maybe went good or bad or anything like that? Was that, or was always usually when you were done, it was clear in his mind what he was doing?
I don't think we ever second guessed ourselves. I really can't imagine any time that it's second guessing.
Yeah.
So, there'd be times that I'd question him in my mind, and yet, he would say, "No, I don't want to do this." Okay, you're the skip, and that's why, like I said, I differ from some of these current teams where we got 4 skips. Basically, they're all trying to convince somebody to the right shot. I don't mind the third telling me, what about this or whatever, but I don't want the lead in the second being involved unless they're told to.
Well, and I'm wondering, but then when you started throwing the last rocks, but he's still calling the game, did he change his dynamic a little bit at times and say, well, did he say, to get a sense what you're comfortable with? Did he kind of flip it a little bit that way sometimes?
Well, other than if you can make a shot with an in turn or out turn, you might say which turn do you want to throw. That's about it. But only if you had an option between one or the other.
Take us through sort of the path then. So you get out of the club, maybe just think of the clubs and states and nationals. Was it with that team then, 73, 74, was there any close calls? Or did you guys find that you were shaking hands early a lot of the time? Like, what was that run like getting to the Worlds? Was there any tense moments?
Well, the one tense moment, like our nationals made didn't the same as the Briar back then. This is why I've always said at the time, there's more pressure at the nationals than there is in the world. And the reason I say that is the nationals, you get out there, you play that first game against Joe Blow, you lose that game. If they win the rest of the games, you're done. You don't have a second kick at the cat. There's no semis and finals. You never know who that team is that can beat you. If they beat you, they're in control and no longer in your control. Whereas you get to the World, you get there and you say, what's my goal? My goal is to get in the semifinals. I really don't care how I get there. You're going to have to win 2 games to win. So I'm saying that whole week of pressure, it isn't the same. We can afford to lose a game or 2, and it makes no difference really at the end result other than ego. And they've since changed the rules for that, so that nationals is no longer like that. And that has some pluses and minuses. The minus is somebody, like ourselves, in that year you might have 3 losses and you still end up winning. They say, well, that's not fair. Well, that's that's the way the world are. So it's like, it is what it is.
You guys went out to New York State. Had you ever headed out that way before, or that was the first trip out that way?
Ironically, the only two times I ever set foot in New York State to curl were in 74 in Schenectady and 78 in Utica, and we won both, undefeated both times. So I love that place.
Yeah. So for you, I guess not, and that was your first nationals, right? For you personally, right?
Yes.
Bud's there. He's, I'm sure, letting you know what to be prepared for. Like you mentioned, there's pressure. So how did you personally, do you remember, kind of respond to that? And what do you remember about that event for yourself?
Well, we played really good. It was in a curling club, and they had reasonably good ice. And I don't recall any super close games. And we had control for the majority of the week, and it wasn't in an arena. I think anytime you get in an arena, you talked about it earlier, and Dave's past, anything could happen, and then oftentimes it does happen, and that's the difference between today and 40 years ago. Now they've got it down mastered, I think, to make it. These ice hackers, they make it perfect, and it's not only perfect ice, it's to change that part of the game too. One of the many things is reading ice. You don't really need. I always said it, like a blind man can almost read ice today because you know what it's going to do. You play a pass, you just take a couple inches of the broom. You could probably put it in many shots. Put the broom in the middle of the rock, and you could throw either turn and you make a peel, for instance. Whereas before you were, yeah, there were lots of slips. It was like normal curling ice. I mean, there's not perfect. There's falls and tricks and all the sheets. And
you guys also had the chaff to deal with. Now, and actually with that, did you guys were always corn broom? Did you dabble in the rink rats a little bit back then, or how did you guys approach the sweeping? It was always corn?
We were always in the corn broom, and I guess it started in the 65 when Bud won the world. They came on Somerville broom, which was a little beaver with a Bud Somerville world champion curler insignia on it. In fact, after we won, we put the Nichols rank on there for a couple of years. So we were using corn broom until I guess it was like 1980, 81 is when we switched. And that was back in the day when Paul Dalzo was using the push broom. In fact, we ran into him in Bonksville in Switzerland, and at the end of he was just a young kid back then, but he was learning from Alberta, and we both were in the same steel and Burn Switzerland together. But we kind of revolutionized the push broom, I thought, from a Canadian perspective at least. Not obviously the Europeans have been using it for years, but one of the things that and got to be honest, I think that was one of the advantages we had when we got to the world is we were using corn and they weren't, and they weren't used to having any type of debris on the ice, and so they'd just let the rock go and they would grab something and they'd miss a shot, as opposed to keeping it clean like they do today.
To wrap up on the nationals, then, so any other kind of memories you have of that moment or that winning your first nationals? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Well, it was kind of funny because we were 10-0 and we were supposed to play California the next day, and the second place team had 2 or 3 losses, so it just didn't matter. There was a big fuss as to whether or not we played the game or not. And California said, "No, we're not playing. We still fit."
Oh, really?
And actually, they had the banquet the night before we even finished the event. They had the closing banquet. So there was a bit of discussion about that. Some of the teams may have wanted to play, or I don't know, but they said, "No, it's over." And we won. So it was a big relief for us.
Did nobody play the final draw then, or was it just you two?
No, they just canceled. They canceled it. Yeah.
Is that probably the only time it happened before or since? I wonder. That's something. We're just gonna not play the last draw.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I think they changed the rules on that. In fact, I think it did happen again in 78. Bruce Roberts' team ended up, we beat him, and then Washington beat him, and they left. And they said, "We're not playing tomorrow." And that then all of a sudden it became, we're not paying out anybody's expenses until it's completed. And in that case, it wasn't it was an mutual agreement. They just said, no, we're leaving. And so that was kind of a change in the way that we were going to handle it. So, and we went out and played. We went out and played.
Yeah.
Even though we had already won.
How soon was it from that nationals to, and you guys you went to Switzerland, right? So the gap between there, was it like you guys all still have jobs? You got to get back and get back to work for a bit?
3 weeks, I think. Yeah, 2 to 3 weeks between the two. Yeah, on to Bern. That's where we had the championship, and we get there and we go to the arena, and it's an arena that was built for the World Hockey Championship. And it sat 17,000 people. So it was just mammoth. But one of the issues with it was it was an open air arena, which ones I've never ever seen before. So the top 10 feet of the arena all the way around is open, and so you're open to the elements of wind and rain and anything else that would go through there. So we get there, and the ice is all frost. And I remember Hector Gervais said, "Hey, when are you going to get the snow off the ice? We need to fix this thing." And so we went from really tossing it really, really hard the first couple of games. In fact, when we played Hector, we played on sheet A. I think it was the first or second day, and it was really frosty. And with my tech delivery, I put a lot of weight on my drum to slide. That's like the third point for balance. And when I hit that frost, it would just spin me around.
Really?
So I went and, when you bought those drums, if you recall, they had like a plastic cover on them when you bought them in the store or whatever. Well, I went and put that plastic back on it, and I played the whole game. Every time I shot it, put the plastic on it, let it slide right through the frost and didn't affect me whatsoever. And Hector, with this delivery and that, he struggled more than anybody, and we ended up beating him pretty handily. But we went from that to the next day or next couple of days, and all of a sudden, it changed again. We had, on one time we played on Wednesday with this roof that was made out of fiberglass or whatever. It was kind of sort of clear. The sun was shining through that day, and on the whole night, it was water from, maybe the 12 foot in the front all the way to the back, and maybe a few feet in front of that, and the rest of the seat was perfectly fine. And so when we curled into that water, it wasn't too bad, although it did stop sooner than you'd think it would. To fly through it was an issue, and I don't remember Bill Shell in particular, what he did. He'd put the rock on the edge, and just slide it until he got through the water, and then he'd flip it. While he's sliding, he'd then put the rock back down and then deliver the rock. Yeah.
Interesting technique. Not,
I mean,
I can't imagine. I mean, but the best way to just get the rock through the puddle, in other words, so that he'd be able to toss it before the hog line. And I've spoken to Warren Hansen about that world. I mean, it changed him as he, he'll still to this day will comment on just how bad those conditions were. And as for him, and he's somebody who came up in football, and he just felt like, and as you might know, Warren was somebody who was really pushing for, more athletes in the sport and shifting curling more along those lines. And he just felt like, how can you run a competition like this?
Well,
this is supposed to be your world.
Yeah.
This is, it's a highlighting of the best in the world, and it's the worst conditions. And it's done, but it's like you're saying, it just changed. And so each day would sort of change, and you had to adapt to it. And you guys clearly did adapt. But I mean, it was kind of like I said, you had to just sort of get into the top four. That was the purpose of the week, right? And get through it.
We ended up going 6-3, and we qualified in third place. And I think we got beat by Switzerland, Sweden, and Germany. And in fact, all the years we played, Germany seems like they beat us more than anybody.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know. They had our number. But anyway, it pitted us up against Switzerland, and the fans were totally ignorant of curling. So they would be cheering shots that, you get a team purposely threw a rock to the house, they would cheer because they figured they missed the shot. I mean, everything. They had no idea. But they were filling the seats. They had, 13,000 people there.
Really? Again, this is for your semifinal against Switzerland with Hattinger.
Well, and most of the week too, because Switzerland was doing so well. They went through the week undefeated. You know, we ended up playing Peter Hettinger in the semifinal, and that's another case where the ice became a big issue. And the whole week it always been straight and fairly quick, except for that first frost game. But eighth end, I think the score was tied, and Locken put up a long guard. I don't know how he ever did it, but it just got like 2 feet over the hog line. And from that point on, I've never seen this before in my life. In any competition, every single person after him tried to draw around that rock, and every single person hit the heck.
Really?
And true.
Yeah.
It was so fast. It was like it was downhill. It was like maybe it was. I don't know, but it was. Bud gets up to shoot, and he says, "Is it fast?" You know, we've already thrown about eight rocks to the house. You know, I said, "Yeah." So he gets up, he throws it to the house. You know, same thing. So anyway, then we I think we get to the last end. I think we're tied up in home. Maybe they blanked 9 and so.
Well, actually, I'm looking I'm looking on. So Wikipedia has a line score. I don't know if it's accurate because you never really know, but it looks here like it was 2-2 in the 10th end, and Switzerland had hammer. Did you go to 12? Like it's saying here, you guys ended up with
no. It was a 10-end game, and they kept it pretty well open. But with the super quick ice, drawing was out of the question because they just got ridiculously fast. So it's like drawing the pot would be impossible. So he had a chance for wide open hitting stick on the 10th. He hits and rolls out. You get into the 11th, same thing. And it got to the point where he had to hit 7/8 of the rock, or it's going to roll out. It was unbelievably fast. It wasn't an easy shot by any means, just because you had to hit it right on the nose. It just kept sliding. So he misses a shot, hits the rolls out in the 11th, and same thing. We kind of put a rock where we thought was a little bit of like a fall area right there, and he kind of, if he played the other turn, he might have missed it, but he played the out turn, and he got my hair outside, and that's ice that it doesn't curl, and they kind of gave it a couple swings with the brush just to keep it clean, and reaching on just kicked us about 6 inches if that, and then we stole one to win. So that was a gift, obviously, but it was unbelievable. The ice had changed so dramatically, and in all 3 of those cases. And then we get to the finals, and it's like Sweden. We had it. We played the end, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
We played in the fourth end, I think it was. They were playing. We had 2 laying 2, and they were playing hits on it, and 2 locks. They grabbed straw from our brooms or whatever, and it trilled and missed. So when we got it, but rather than play a 3-drop for 3, it was a long guard out about 2 feet maybe from the rings in the front. And I said, no, let's go roll them in. Makes a perfect roll in. Both locks ended up on the outside of the 12-foot. And we got 4, and then basically the game was over.
Getting back to that semifinal, I guess you quieted 12,000 Swiss people at the end of that game. I assume that must have been, it was interesting.
Oh yeah. And that was the only loss. They hadn't been beat all week. And there the ice got them. It really did, because what typically would be an easy shot was no longer easy. And plus the pressure that went on there too. Plenty of home crowd, and and I remember sweeping that, especially on the 11th rock. And after he hit our rock, I had to beat the heck out of that rock to get it out of the rings, and it only went out by an inch. So it wasn't a gaffed it, but he hit it at 11 o'clock probably, and he still rolled out. So sometimes you gotta get luck, and that was one of the big breaks of the year. Came at a good time.
Yeah. And anything else you kind of remember from that week, or anything you took away from just after you won? Anything that you kind of recall?
Well, other than I think, well, now the Texas is dead, I suppose I can tell about him. Supposedly he was out on the town and barefoot in the middle of the night drinking gin and tonics. But and then back then, this was the first start of when you could no longer smoke on the ice, and I think he was a smoker. And they had millions of people there from Canada where they had bought him this ashtray, which is like 3 feet off the ground or whatever, and they stuck it behind the stands, and so he'd sneak out and smoke whenever he had the opportunity. And then Bud was a smoker too, and he was kind of, I never smoked, so it didn't bother me at all. That was really the first time they enforced no smoking. That was a change as well.
Okay, so there was some celebrating afterwards.
Oh yeah. Oh, there's a long story behind that too, but the short story is my wife was there and Locken's wife was there, so we wanted to go to Paris. I'd never been to Paris. I'd never been overseas, and so the American crew, or the people that were in tennis, paid for our air ticket to fly to Paris for the night just to go there, and we just had one problem after the next. We couldn't get anybody. We had all our trophies and all that kind of stuff that we had to haul, our brooms and everything else. And when we were in Brun, we had a big van for all that stuff. And when you get to the airport, they got nothing like that. And I said, well, we're going to need like three cabs to get there to get all our stuff in. And I'll go and see if I can find a van. So Bud takes off, and I have to get a van. In the meantime, all these drivers are trying to pick us up, and we say, no, they can't both speak French or whatever. No, we're not ready. Waiting for Bud. So finally, Bud comes back and says, no, we're going to have to get cabs. So we asked for a cab. They just shook their head. They just drove right by us. So now we got to go to the cops and say, nobody will pick us up. And then the guy would point over. So and say, the pit man said, no, don't pick these guys up. So they took us to the hotel, St. George the Snake. I never forget it. And we get there, and I get about to check in. And this was 1974, and the rooms were close to $500 a night.
Wow.
And we said, I ain't staying there. $500 a night. So Bob and I said, well, we'll go see if we can find another spot. So we go and try to find another hotel, and nearly out the triumph where all the roads are kind of like the spoke of a wheel, if you know Paris. And so we finally find this spot, and we come back and said, well, we get this for $110 or whatever it was. And so get a cab. No, I'm not taking a cab. We're going to walk. So here we are, just on the World Series. We're walking down the street of Paris with umpteen bags, and one of the prizes they gave us was this big metal plaque, which weighed about 5 pounds by itself. And anyway, you get halfway there, and we get lost.
Oh, no.
So we just stopped there, and Bud and I go on a scouting mission to find out how to get there. So we finally, long story short, we got there, check in, and we go to sit down in the bar, and just so happened that they were playing on TV in Paris the finals, and everybody was pointing their finger at us.
Really?
That's us.
Oh wow! Really? Yeah. So.
Well, anyway, and then.
Nice.
We go to the Eiffel Tower, and we took to the bar and outside, and he said, "Oh, you want a beer? A little beer, or a big beer?" Well, Tom's wife doesn't drink. So all the little one, and Tom said, "No, give me a big one." Well, the big one was a pitcher, which we didn't understand, and the little one was a glass was about a foot tall.
Yeah.
So here we are sitting on the street and drinking out of a pitcher of beer, and anyway, it was quite a deal.
So it sounds very romantic. I've always heard Paris is romantic. It sounds very romantic. Well, you mentioned that you did run across Gausel in so you was that back in Switzerland. So you guys got invites to some bonspiels, and I don't know. I guess the CBC Classic had your team at that point. Like a bunch of things for next season, I guess, right? That are all. I
never did get to that point after he won the Grand Prix in the fall of '74. Right after that, we had the CBC Curling Classic, and that happened to be an Olympic. Fall of '74, we had won the Grand Prix for the second time, and then they went and played in the BBC, and we played Jim Armstrong in the finals. If you remember big Jim Armstrong, he was a dentist. I mean, he was the strongest sweeper I've ever seen in my life. I'm told that he broke 2 wrists sweeping in the briar, and I can believe it because he skipped, and he'd jump up to the hard line and start sweeping, and it was just like toothpick to him. I don't know if he was beating that, but anyway, we got a close game, and Bud made a double raise, kind of lined up, but a double raise takeout with a roll behind cover to beat him in the final game. So that was we had won that, and that was the start of our 75 year, for the most part.
Getting back to it, you mentioned how sometimes teams have adversities, but you didn't win all the time. Obviously, I mean, was it usually I mean, I'm looking at it. Was it usually you come up against that pesky Roberts team, or just things would like? But you were always in nationals and in the hunt every year, I guess, right? Were you?
Yeah, we won. I won the state eight. I won the state 8 times, and Bud has won it about 13 times or something like that. But yeah, we lost, and Bud was still on that rock. 76, we lost to Roberts in Wausau, and I think they might have beat us in the round robin. So we both had one loss, all I remember, and then we played them off. And we had dirty brooms, which was the Beaver, but nothing like the brooms that they had, which I think was like a blackjack. It may not have been the black, but similar. So every time they started, they take out new brooms, then it was debris everywhere. And so like a draw shot was going drawn about 10 feet and maybe even 12. And yeah, Bud played the typical draw game, which probably was a mistake under those conditions because, the straw affected our shots more than it affected theirs. Yeah. Anyway, we had one of those games where things didn't go right and we got beat. And they went on to win the world that year. So yeah, that was a disappointment.
How did Bruce and Bud get along? I mean, were they chatty with each other or not really? Like I was talking to Gary Cleffman about this, and how did he kind of approach it? I think he said that was it Bud was pretty quiet out on the ice, I think, right? Or was it Bruce that was that way? One of them was maybe a bit quieter than the other.
Oh, they're both real quiet, and I think they had friendly chatter throughout. But obviously they were our nemesis, and I beat him probably as many times as he beat me throughout the years. Dating back to the early years, and we beat him in the Olympic trials, which we'll probably get to later. So I mean, we were the team. Both of us had to get through each other, and obviously, they don't become your best friends when they're your main competitor.
Like Arnie and Jack, right? Kind of became more friendly later when Arnold wasn't winning anymore. But when he was winning, Jack didn't want to be buddies with him. Jack wanted to beat him. That's kind of how it works. You know how in Ontario a lot of times, right, teams would sit together. What was the in the Superior Club or in the areas after a game, would teams commonly sit together? Was that sort of tradition or not so much? Was it more like Western Canada?
No, it was a tradition. Definitely. I mean, obviously, when we're playing in the competition, like I said, we probably didn't drink, between games or whatever. So that didn't happen. But I guess it was in Boston or whatever, or the last game of the day, then we would, but if we had to go back and play 2-3 games a day, you did that time for that, obviously. Then we're back to eating.
But the competition between your teams, and I mean, over those years, I guess the Roberts team and the the Nichols Somerville team. Like I'm assuming though that it was great respect. Was there ever any ever kind of moments? Like I can't imagine either of your teams with any sort of gamesmanship against each other. I don't even think it would work, right? Like you're both at kind of that level. I always found.
I didn't know about this, but at the time. But what the Roberts would do, they had a separate broom that they'd use for shooting.
Okay.
And so like when we played in Utica, and they didn't have dividers between the sheets, so they'd go out and leave their broom sticking on the ice where the divider would otherwise be, but just sitting out in the middle, and then somebody else, like our team members, would walk down and would trip on it or fall or whatever, and finally, I think Cristman said, don't leave your broom there, whatever. And so they put it back there, and he took it and he threw it across the sheet, four sheets down, and I said, you can go get it. And they just looked at Bob, it's a big, strong kid. I mean, he never wanted to mess with him, one of the strongest guys you've ever seen. And they finally got the broom and didn't say a word.
Oh, I like that one. That's a good one.
That was about the only time that I had heard anything like that. But you're coming from Hibbing. Hibbing's got a reputation, and they're from the range. And there's times when there's a curler named Pete Deasy, which was a little guy, but Spitfire curler. And they had a couple of big guys, and well, it became you're going to get ready to sweep a lock. The opponent's rock from line back, they'd always run up with they'd get in their way and whatever, and one of these guys just knocked them on the ice, knocked them to the ice, broke 2 ribs.
Really?
I mean, oh yeah. I mean, they had much more reputation for doing things like that up in Kidding, just because that's the nature of the area. I mean, it is what it is. But anyway, that area had two different characters up there, whole thing.
To me, I love this because, yes, curling's a gentleman's game and a little bit like golf. Often you call your own mistake if you burn a rock and that type of thing, but it's still a sport. And I mean, there's so many great stories of the intensity and that. To me, I just find it's part of the color of the game. I mean, you're out there, you want to beat the other guy. That's kind of how it works. It's not, you're going to shake hands before and you have a beer after, but boy, you're going to really try and beat them on the ice. That's it. And if somebody's doing something where they might be stretching the rules a little or, something that you're going to call it out. I love that about the sport, right? There's no referees and umpires out there to call pass interference. You're calling it yourself, which I always thought is great. I find that entertaining. I mean, to me, it's part of the charm of the sport. It makes it more interesting.
And then brings back to the olden days. There's a guy in our club named Glenn Harris. He was one of the elders in curling throughout the country. And my dad, when we played against him, he'd always get mad at him because people would put the broom down. So he would put the broom down, and he would stand right behind him and put his broom right next to it. And and he'd call him like, "You need to put that broom, crosswise so you're not so you can see it in the phone." And that's one of the reasons why when I started skipping, I turned the broom upside down. For not only because you can see a white handle, and you can't quite always see the broom itself. So that's what I always, plus you're getting narrower, you're getting, exactly where you want the broom to be. So, but yeah, there's a few issues like that come up from time to time.
We talked about it earlier. So with Bud's heart situation, so into that 77, 78 season, when did you know that Bud wasn't going to play, or what had happened, or was this was there like an emergency hospital trip, or what had actually occurred that year?
Well, as I recall, and my memory isn't quite as good as it should be, but earlier in that season, in the fall, it might have been like October, November, or whatever. Bud had come down with spinal meningitis, and we were diagnosed with spinal meningitis.
Okay,
very, could be deadly disease, and it wasn't until he went down to the Mayo Clinic, and that's when they discovered this leaky heart valve, and so he said, "Well, we need to go in there and replace the valve with either a baby valve or a manufactured replacement," and he was going to be gone for the year, and so that was like 15th or so of December, or early December, something like that. That's when we ended up picking up Bob Cristman to fill out our team, and we just expected that this was going to be a short-term deal, and then obviously we went on to win, and when the following year did come
Bob was from the club. Like, was he? You guys had knew he was a known.
He had curled with both of us. He was a friend of both of ours. And, strong sweeper. And in fact, Bud had taught him. He used to have a fly on his left leg, sort of not totally flat, but anyway, he had 2 or 3 knee surgeries, and so he couldn't do that anymore. So Bud said, "Why don't you just get like a roofer's pad and put a slider on it?" And so Bud actually revolutionized the sport by he created this slider, which was what Bob used, and all the way through his whole career, he come out to the going on. And the beauty of that is you're still right down on the ice, as low as you can possibly be. And
so he was knee sliding, like it was on a roofer knee pad type thing. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, and it goes on your left knee, and you come immediately out of the hack onto that and slide, and with that way, you have no pressure on your knee itself, because it's just bone or whatever that's
fit in okay. And you guys, so that season then, so Bud didn't play all year that year. That was, you started right from the beginning, or he had started a little bit in the fall, I guess, with you, and then.
I can't remember. I don't think he did play because I think he was sick. So I don't think we played much at all. Any skills or anything, didn't have anything to play for the most part. I mean, we might have missed some club skills and stuff. But
if you think about, that run, then that's the one year where Bud's not on the ice with you. It's because, again, after this, I guess you guys, and we'll get to that, but you continue to throw the last rocks, but, Bud's there, and did the season feel very different? Like, what did it feel like not to have Bud with you? Like, it must have been kind of a different.
Well, I felt again, I had been a skip my whole life. So it's not as if I'm not used to skipping. But I kind of chuckle as I think back, because there's so many people in our clubs. They ain't gonna go anywhere. They can't win. They're not gonna win with that team. Oh yeah. And that was actually helped us a little bit by saying, okay, we'll prove to you that, what you're saying is wrong. Because once again, we went like 27-0 to get from the club to the World Championships. And we only lost one game in that whole season to anybody else, and that was to Paul Pustovar in a Super League that we played in Duluth. He was the only one to beat us until we got to World, and then we stumbled a couple of games at the World, but we still ended up winning. So.
And that was in Winnipeg. So what was the crowds like at that? So was it held in the arena then, I imagine?
That was fabulous because it was in the Winnipeg Arena, the old Jets, like the Jets played, had seating of about 10,008. I think it's the same arena we played last year in, to be honest. I think it was the same. I know it was the same arena. But every single game was sold out, 10,000 plus. And, you had to get fired up about playing there. So, anyway, it's really interesting, about there. First day we played, I think it was Great Britain, and I had to draw to win. So we won one up on them. And the second game we played Norway, that was Christian Storm, who ended up playing in the finals, but we played him and walked away. They quit after it ended. So here we are. Everybody else was still on the ice playing. And so Bruce Bennett, who was our sports writer from Duluth, was up covering the event. He was just a wonderful guy. He was born with no arms other than to his elbows and no hands or whatever. And he participated in all sports. He could go hit the ball 180 yards on the golf course. He curled. He could type 80 words a minute, and he's just a great guy. But anyway, he says, I want to interview you guys. And said, want to come up and have a beer? I said, yeah, for sure. I'm not going to sit and watch curling. And so we go upstairs and we walk into the VIP lounge, which was there, and they immediately said, well, you can't be in here. I said, well, we're going in, we're curling. We're playing. You've not done that, or you can't be in here. You're going to have to leave.
You're not an important enough person to be in the VIP.
Yeah. So they kicked us out of the freaking lounge. It's like, okay, now what are we going to do? And they said, well, once you come back to the press room, they said, we got beer in the press room in there. So we walk into the press room, and they said, oh, they can't come in here. They can't come in here. So again, blow the gasket, and I think finally he talked him into, letting us sit and keep conducting this interview, and get fired. Their company was first writer in Winnipeg. I think that was his name. I have it written down here somewhere. But anyway, headlines of the paper the next morning is the angry American. And they went on to explain how we couldn't get a beer and how it mad we were. That was kind of funny.
So that week, you landed 7-2. Was it? What do you recall about getting to that final weekend? Was it? It sounds like you enjoyed it. You embraced it. You liked throwing the last rock. You hadn't thrown last rock for a while. Was there any nerves? Did you find as the week went on, or did you feel pretty comfortable?
I felt comfortable, and I think part of that is, and even going back to 74, I think what helped was, in 74 we had two guys that had been there before, Bud and Bill. And me and Tom were rookies, okay, and so been there, done that, and I think that that certainly made things easy for us in 78. But what I noticed a lot, and if you look back in history, I think it's pretty evident, especially if you're a Canadian and you win the Brier and you're a newcomer, they don't win many of the first World Championships because the pressure, especially in being a Canadian, is so high, and then the expectations are so high that it makes it really tough for that, first appearance. I think after time they can figure it out, but it does help to have that prior experience.
Was this your first time meeting Ed Lukowich, or had you come up against him maybe before, maybe in a Bonspiel or something? Because he's definitely a unique character.
I don't think so. I don't think so. We came up afterwards. We played in the Olympic trials, or Olympic played on in Calgary.
I don't think he'd come into his own self at that point, but Ed is definitely an eccentric character. He's also a science fiction writer. He's somebody who was very involved in curling throughout many of its eras, but he's definitely got a unique personality. I don't know if it came out back then, because I don't know, so that was a moment where, Mike Chernoff is holding the broom and Ed's throwing last rock, which of course you then do when Bud comes back to the team. But I'm wondering this, was that very common, or was this kind of unique at the time? Like if you think back, growing up in Superior, was there a lot of situations where, somebody else held the broom? Well, I guess with you and your dad at one point, but for a highly competitive team, kind of have a sense that was a bit unique what Mike and Ed had done. I wonder if that had any bearing on what you and Bud later did.
Well, I had seen it before, and the guy mentioned a friend, Defra, and he owned the TV station in Duluth, and he was from Hibbing, and he had a young player called O'Leary, and so Fran would hold the broom, play lead and throw, and hold the broom for the game. So it did happen, a lot of times. And like even in Bud's situation, part of that is because he couldn't sweep like I could sweep. If we were both equal, that might have changed everything, but
So you're saying when he comes back, I mean, you might have even just called the game. It's just that, and it sounds like you enjoyed sweeping, so maybe that was part of it.
Well, I couldn't imagine him sweeping.
Yeah.
Really. So he's no longer with us, so I can say that.
But sweeping was an advantage, right? It was a big part of the sport, just as it is today, I think. But
big part of the game, big part of our game. I mean, I always felt that Tom and I, particularly, there were very few people that could match us playing in the room, and we, to this day, my left arm is bigger than my right arm.
Really?
And that's from some. Oh, sure.
Really? Like
it's that. Oh, it's just obvious. Oh, it's just obvious. And that's the story. I pounded the drum, and so there was a lot of hitting the ice super hard. It wasn't just speed or sweeping; I was beating it.
So when it came about, and moving away from corn, because everybody did, were you sad a little, or like a little melancholy, and saying, like, because I've talked to lots of folks that kind of missed it.
Oh, we lost a lot.
You think so? Yeah.
I always felt we had a 1 or 2 rack advantage just by being good sweepers, and then you go to the push broom and we were just average, and I don't think we gained anything, but we weren't getting any younger for one thing, and it was just easier for us to use the push broom. It kept cleaner ice, and there was positives there, but I don't think it helped us at all in terms of winning or losing. I think we're much better off back with corn.
I'm wondering, being Winnipeg, which maybe not too far away, did you have a pretty good contingent came up, and did you have a lot of fans there too, and family? And
oh, we did, which was much different than we had in Switzerland. So that was one of the huge advantages. And I guess it ended up the finals was televised on educational TV across the country, and especially when I made that super shot through the port. I've been in airports and had been in airports back then, and they recognized me and say, "Yeah, I want to make that." It was amazing that how far, because I travel quite a bit for work. So I'd be in airports, and I think all over the country, they actually, for the first time, they actually were exposed to curling on TV.
Wikipedia is not showing me the line score, so I'm not sure the outcome. But what took place in that semifinal? So you played Sweden. It's just showing a 6-5 final score, but I don't know if it was as close as it shows, or was it?
It was a close game. I think we were tied up coming home, and I had Hammer with a couple rocks in play. I came down. They had a rock on the front of the 4th foot, probably at it was like 1 o'clock. Maybe faced the other way, and I came down and bumped it back. And to be honest, it was still fairly close to see who would shot rock. I thought we were closer, but I wouldn't bet my life on it. And they came down trying to kind of do what I did, and got a little inside, and they had to wait. And they ended up just instead of pushing us out, he pushed us in. So I didn't, I don't have to shoot my last rock, which would have been pretty much a wide open free dot to the pot, but things happen there too. So that's
and Carson Sorum, who you mentioned, so you played him a few times then, I guess,
Christian
right?
Sorum.
Christian Sorum. You played him a few times over the years, I guess, in these worlds, right?
That was the first, yeah. And I played him in London, and we played part of his team in the Olympics. He wasn't there, but Igel, Ramsgel, and the rest of his team, some of his members were Igel skipped, and so. Yeah, they're nice, really nice guys.
Yeah, I'm wondering if you over the years and had any connection with them that way. But was Bud able to make the trip to Winnipeg when you guys, or was he back home?
He did at the beginning. I'm not sure, can't remember exactly why, but he came. He was there for 1 or 2 days, and he had just been cleared to fly. He'd had the full open heart surgery, and had to heal some off before they'd let him fly. But he was there like Monday and Tuesday or something like that, and then left to go back. So it was great to have him in the stand rooting flags.
So no, he didn't do any coaching then. There wasn't any like the help you'd gotten before and that other. Oh, and I guess if I forgot to ask you this, so you'd mentioned about the 65 World. So in 74, 78, was there a White House trip? Was there kind of other things? You do get invited to more events. I mean, kind of take me through what it was like being a 2-time world champion in the U.S. in the 70s. Did Sports Illustrated do any write-ups as an example, things like that? Like what do you recall? What was it like?
Yeah, I mean, they made front page news, obviously, and we had same as Bud's deal. We had a big contingent at the airport. We were only flying from Winnipeg here, so it wasn't quite the same. But and then they had a ceremony. In fact, Bud Grant from the Minnesota Vikings, he's from Superior, and I think he coached Winnipeg Bombers and back in his day, and he curled. So he knew Bud, and he knew me. So
okay, now I got to ask you some Bud Grant. So yeah, I grew up in Winnipeg, right? My dad was a huge Vikings fan, and there's that Bud Grant connection. So I grew up a Vikings fan, and I'm assuming you're a Vikings fan then too, are you? Or you're a Packers fan? How does that work?
No, I'm Packers.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
True and both.
So Bud Grant, who incredible legacy, passed away recently. I mean, it's pretty few people who played in the NFL and the NBA and won an NBA championship. It's an incredible athlete. But so he actually was from Superior and actually did he curl socially then? Like he actually had some involvement with the sport from time to time? I guess being in Winnipeg too, he'd been exposed to it.
He curled when he was in Winnipeg.
Yeah, okay.
He curled at the Grant Club in Winnipeg. And he was coaching, and so he got onto the sport, and then I think he obviously followed the history when Bud won the first World and got a lot of
interesting attention.
So yeah, I got a lot of stories.
Okay, so we don't know what Bud's outturn was like or anything. We didn't, or is he like he was? He had any? He was a great athlete in other sports. I wonder if was he any good? I imagine he probably could hold his own in a regular club game. I would imagine.
Well, he was pretty good. I understand back in the day in Canada. They played third.
Just to think of it now, I didn't realize I should have been interviewing Bud Grant 4 years ago. Why didn't I do that? I had no idea.
Yeah, I've got a lot of Bud Grant stories because he and all his high school graduates got together every year for 50-some years out here in my cabin, and every year we would have this get together, and Bud would be there, and we'd be beating him. I got a picture of him right in front of me here where we're beating in the finals of the big bocce ball tournament, and he was presenting us the trophy. So, and I we played gin rummy with him, and he got tons of Bud Grant stories. He was probably the cheapest guy that ever worked in the game. Going back, and he was the last guy that anybody ever paid. Got this get together for the weekend. He was just I can go on and on and on. I don't have any time to tell you all of them. But
well, the one story I thought was amazing. I guess he used to have a garage sale every year, and people would come and line up the cars because they'd just love to come and meet Bud.
Yeah, but you didn't hear the rest of that story. So they asked him, what do you like best about these garage sales? Thinking that meeting all these people and everything else. What he said? He says, the money. And I think that was actually Bud. That he was looking at it for the money. And Doug Sutherland, he played for the Vikings. He had a whole bunch of Bud Grant stories too. And when he played for him in the Super Bowl and others.
It's funny, like you said that you guys, on the front page and everything else. It's interesting how curling's grown from an Olympic level, but strangely, the media these days, and I mean also like who has a newspaper anymore, it's not so common, but generally I find the coverage of the sport in many ways, particularly here in Canada for sure too, is just, it's actually dropped. There's part of me that feels like the sport in the late 70s was maybe at its pinnacle. It was big. If you think about the money, or some of the car spiels I mentioned, but even some of the cash spiels like Thunder Bay, you'd make good money, and in today's dollars, it's more than what you're getting in a bond spiel today. It did feel like the sport was on the map a little bit when you're the world champion in '78. It sounds like.
Yeah, and again, we had been there before, and actually, Bruce Roberts had just won it 2 years before, and look at our '78 win. We're the last American team to win, and it's been, what is that, 45 years.
Looking back, doesn't that seem surprising a little bit?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
You
But
got to
it's,
go. You got to go medal though.
and
That was pretty special. I mean, if I were a betting man, I would have thought there would have been a few more since then. It's kind of surprising.
yeah, but Schuster, was able to really boost the sport when he won the gold medal a few years ago. And I think he had a lot of TV coverage, and since that is, NBC covered it a lot. In fact, it was the most widely watched sport in the Winter Olympics was curling in the U.S. even, and people loved it. But now it lost that somehow. Because I haven't seen curling on the TV for a long time.
So in '78, you mentioned they televised that final game. I mean, the Superior Club, was it pretty busy? Was curling kind of hopping in the Minnesota, Wisconsin area? Or it always had that roots there, or did it seem bigger, or was it growing? What do you recall about?
To be honest, I kind of think with the wins from Bud and the fact that we had won 74, I think that they kind of expected it. I mean, it's like it wasn't a big deal anymore, to be honest with you. That, okay, yeah, you win again. It's like, because the U.S. had won, 3 out of 5 years, basically, and all from this area. But, 74, 6, and 8. And then you look back now, and nobody's even gotten in the finals for all those years.
I guess the challenge has always been access, right? You need to be able to access the equipment, get on ice, and that's one of the struggles. But was there a bit of a bump there in the late 70s after those wins?
No. It really wasn't until the Olympics, I think, that really you saw a big boost.
And a chance, and I don't know, maybe it was difficult, but arena curling started to take off eventually, where hockey rinks would be converted, like a lot of across the U.S. because there just aren't clubs. First thing, well, we got to get rocks. So if we can get a set of rocks, now we got to find some ice, and let's just convert some. I think it's in a better spot now, but I really got into curling about the mid 80s and like about 84, 85 when I started in Winnipeg. I don't have a sense of what that area was like, but I would have I just kind of imagined, 3 world championships. A lot of the history, you were talking about, your grandfather and, Bud's father and grandfather. And it's kind of surprising. It didn't sort of trigger more growth. And maybe it was hard because there just wasn't the opportunities for people to play it. Somebody in Tennessee couldn't just go find a club. Somebody in certain states. I keep hearing that in the U.S. it's still there's a growth and people want it, like the learn to curl stuff, and it does kind of every 4 years there's a little bump for sure, right? The example I think of is golf, right? I mean, golf is a sport that's only going to grow as quickly as you can build 18 holes or 9 holes at least and get equipment available. It's got to have these boom cycles, and the U.S. went through boom cycles in golf. You go back to Francis Ouimet, and then courses get built, and then certain Arnie had a big, I think, push on for golf in the for the everyman, as opposed to being, this more country club approach. And, but it takes time. And, we see curling now and golf was similar out in Asia, where it's starting to grow, but it just grows with the facilities and the ability for them to get access to the sport. But it will happen. I feel like in Canada, it's almost shrinking.
But it's happening in all other sports too. I mean, you look at bowling. Bowling has gone completely down. And part of that is the drinking laws and DWIs and all that sort of thing, concerns about that part of it. And the other part is now you've got working spouses almost everywhere. So people don't have they want to spend with their families. They don't have time to do the things that, we used to do when I was, going through that age. My wife didn't work.
Sounds like with you and Bud and that team, right? You guys never really had a time where there was like a lot of teams have a shelf life. Like it's hard to maintain that competitive level and everything else. And you guys had a few changes here and there, right? With the team a bit, and Bill stepped away, or how did things kind of evolve then in those later years as you're throwing the rock and Bud comes back? Like what?
Yeah, we left. Tom Locken.
Yeah, what happened?
Yeah, he kind of left me for a while, and as it turned out, I brought him back for the Olympics. And he, I mean, it wasn't like we were like friends, but and Bob Buchanan, who we brought in, we're all good friends, and so nobody's going to say anything bad about each other. And I think they understood it. It's I'm sure it was hard for them. But
did Bill finally just want to slow down, or did what was there with Bill Strum? Was there what ended up happening with him?
I don't know. I kind of think that he had a long career going, back to 65 till 79. I mean, it's close to 15 years. I mean, my whole career was only about 20. So, and then Bill, it turns out we pick him up as a coach for Olympics in Calgary, and he and Bud pick up their sons, and they win the trials, and they had asked me to be the coach. Not the coach, I was the fifth man
Okay.
in Albertville, and so the connection continued, and so Bill was a part of our Olympic team, in '88, and so he went to two Olympics. But if I think you get tired, I don't know. It's just to play that many years, and I got to the point. To be honest with you, I have my career at work, and I finally said, hey, I got to rededicate my life to work. I'm 40 years old, and it worked for me. I mean, I ended up in just a few years going from a manager to a vice president, and we used to retired because I was 53 when I retired finally because I was in Edmonton. But had a great time there and enjoyed being there, and I miss it in many different ways. But I wanted to get back home, and because this has been my life.
Take me through that Olympics. So, well, first off, were you a fan of the Olympics? Did you ever actually even think of curling and connect it with the Olympics? Was that a thought, growing up or in the 70s?
I never even dreamed of it until it became apparent. And it was kind of funny because in spring of '87, we got beat in the state by Steve Brown, and Bud was kind of discouraged and stuff. No, don't worry about it. And we ended up in second place. I said, we're now qualified for the Olympic trials. And I'm not sure he even knew that. And we hadn't been playing really well that year. And I just kind of got too old, I guess, whatever. But so we decided to play in the Saville Ponce field, the Springs field, they call it. And so the four of us, we went up there, and all of a sudden we kind of ratcheted down, and we won the spiel and beat some good teams. And so, with the trials coming up, when they were being held in St. Paul, it was a 32-team modified triple knockout with all the good teams there. That became my goal, and I think all of ours kind of reconstituted our desires, and really worked hard saying, this is now my goal.
So you went back to drinking fewer beers between games then at that point, Bob? Is that?
Oh yeah, I mean it was all work. It was all work, Yeah.
So you guys weren't really necessarily a favorite at that point going into that trials, were you? Or because, as you say, you had kind of fallen off a bit, or where was the competition at that stage?
Say that again.
Well, were you guys weren't necessarily a favorite going in, I guess, then, right? Or because of...
Oh, no, I'm not sure anybody really, I know who was a heavy favorite, and Roberts was in it. I think he might have had a little different team. Steve Brown, he had been winning and beating us year to year in the state, and then going to he's been to one or two worlds. But I don't know. I mean, we're still, we're two-time world champions. I think, we did. I don't know if they did say that we were favored, but obviously everybody knew that we had to be one of the top teams to contend with. And we played on great ice, St. Paul Curling Club, and they had brought in these huge compressors and trucks and put actually holes in the walls of the club. And this was competition was in late April.
Okay.
And it was like 80 degrees outside. And so they, did quite the job
Really?
to get good refrigerated ice. Oh yeah.
That's not easy.
No, it was like a summer spiel. It really was. I mean, people were out golfing and everything else. I mean, it was a whole different.
And of course, it had never been done before. Of course, there's been a lot said about what they did in Canada. Had a lot of teams all grouchy because they wanted to try to have some teams that were teams, and then they had camps and all this other thing. Sounds like in the U.S., it was just, no, we're going to get our best 32 triple knockout. But you said you had to qualify into it, but then you had some time to prepare. What was the event like then? Was it, I guess in terms of the play, was there it played down to a final, I guess? Who did you play in the final?
We played Steve Brown in the finals, who had just beaten us in the state, before. And so had a good match with that. And, going back to '78, we dedicated our '78 win to Bud Somerville. And then when we went on to the Olympic trials, my dad was dying of prostate cancer, and I kind of dedicated the event to him. So it kind of went through our minds all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he did that. He ended up dying like 4 months later. So we went through a tough time.
Oh, so did he get to see in the Olympics?
No, he died before that.
Yeah. Well, again, just with the trials, any memories of kind of close games, or was it did it sort of happen for you guys that week? Was there anything that sticks out?
We ended up losing one game, Bemidji, I think, and but with the triple knockout, I mean, most people had to, you had to lose three, and so you had all the good teams there, and so you're playing good teams every time you turn around. But we played good.
Would have to beat you twice, or how did is that?
No, that was the modified part of it.
Oh, modified part. Okay, I see.
Once you got there, we're down to two teams. One of us is going to win. And we had a relatively close game. I made a run back double on one of their rocks and late in like the eighth or seventh or eighth, and which if I hadn't made it, it might have changed the outcome of it. But other than that, then we had control coming home. I think we were one or two up home. So with Hammer.
You're an Olympian, which is an interesting thing as a curler, right? Because it's, I mean, were you treated like an Olympian, or because it was an exhibition? I don't know. Just tell me about that experience going to Calgary. What was it like?
Well, it was unbelievable being part of the, walking to the stadium, and having that big of an audience. All the people in both Albertville and in Calgary. I mean, Albertville, was sat on the bus with Nancy Kerrigan and the other one that won the gold. But anyway, for 2 hours, we were able to talk to them, and we ran into George Steinbrenner, the owner of the the Yankees, and talked to him for about an hour as we waited to get into the opening ceremony. I mean, it was a lot of totally different than curling because it wasn't the only thing in town. But the one thing that really spoiled it was they said originally that we played in Maxwell Arena, which is in Calgary, a small arena, maybe, I don't know, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people. And they said, well, it was the first event to sell out. So we had tons of people who wanted to go up and watch, but couldn't get tickets. Well, turns out, whoever the idiot they had running this thing, he issued one ticket for the whole day. So, there was like, with the men and the women both, there was 4 draws. Rather than have a ticket for each draw, the ticket said 8 a.m. Thursday with a dash on it. Okay, so we said, I don't want to go there at 8 o'clock in the morning. They didn't realize that ticket was for the whole day, and so we had nobody in the stands.
Well, I mean, I'd heard about the nobody. Yeah, I'd heard about the nobody in the stands, but they hadn't been that well explained to me that it is sort of a day ticket, and the way it was marketed was a little unclear. And then, on top of that, I think also you had a lot of curling fans that wanted tickets, but sometimes there were tickets that were there was corporate tickets and things that happened where maybe there weren't even people that were big curling fans. So you had people that couldn't get in that wanted to get there. You'd immediately think, oh, Calgary.
I think the people who got the tickets, they didn't know what they had.
Yeah.
They got a ticket in the mail, said 8 o'clock. Said, I don't want to go at 8 o'clock in the morning. They didn't realize they had a ticket for the day.
For the whole day, and they could have gone in. Wow.
They could go to any yard they wanted to. And so all of a sudden, toward the end, they were giving the tickets away, basically. Anybody, but I bet you we didn't have 100 people watching each of the games. I mean, it's like,
which is so strange. I mean, this is a city of Paul Gausel and Ed Lukowich, and you've got, they were, Ed had won the Worlds in '86, and it's a curling city. Calgary is in Alberta is a big curling place. It's just odd how it would kind of get messed up that way. But then again, also, there might have been some back end politics because it wasn't a true medal sport yet. But I guess to that point, you still felt like an Olympian. Like the experience was that, and I think we look
for sure
back on it very fondly as a great for curlers and curling fans as kind of that. Yes, Nagano was sort of the first real medal, but '88 was special in many ways. And I've seen some of the video now too, and I don't know if you've been able to see it, but there's some a little bit of video of your game with one of your games, and I think it was probably special too because Bud, like, how old are you then at that point? You're pretty close to 40. So Bud's about
40,
close to 50.
Yeah.
So Bud's about close to 50, right?
He was 51, yeah.
Most likely Bud's not, this is his farewell. He's probably not going to be coming back and playing in the Worlds too often in the next few years. Although, like you say, came back, but then 4 years later, actually, pretty impressive. So I know it's funny, you mentioned like how you had some knee trouble, he had some knee trouble, but you guys held up pretty good then. And, managed to play pretty well. You're obviously crafty veterans well into your later years.
Well, thank you. It's amazing that neither Bud and I have had knee problems. I mean, Bud was no longer with us, but he didn't have any. He had a whole bunch of other problems, but knee problems weren't one of them. Like I felt I've got a bad back, but mainly my knees are perfect. I ran for 20 years and in the same time frame, so I was pounding pavement for quite a bit, which you'd expect to have knee problems, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Lucky for that. But I swim every day. That's what's helping me a lot. I probably swim 330 days of the year now and have been for the last 20 years, 15 years. So, yeah, I mean, that's good for my body. It doesn't stress out my.
So when Albertville comes along, but you had like, had you pretty much like hung them up by then, or you like you mentioned that your career was taking kind of priority. What was the situation around when because they picked you up as an alternate, I guess, to join them at the Olympics, or that
an alternate. And the reason for that is I could fit into any of the positions basically, and if anybody needed it, and yeah, that was. I mean, I had to get back in curling shape
did you? Yeah.
to go there. I didn't have to play at all, but I was ready to play, and ironically, like within a year, that's when I blew my knee out.
Oh yeah.
From I could no longer do the tuck delivery, and I had to switch to flat foot, and my game just it was uh, severely hampered from that point forward. So,
what were the years you were in Edmonton? When was that? You said, as you said, just kind of towards the end of your working career. So that would have been
1996, 96 to 01. And I was there when they had the Briar. The Briar was there one year when I was there. I think it was 97.
And what do you remember about Hector then? So I never got to meet him. I was actually out in Manitoba, Ontario when he was kind of in his later years here. And you mentioned that you played with Rod Hunter. You said, like, I did get to meet Rod, and wonderful man. What just any stories or things you recall about?
I was really really saddened to hear that he had passed away. I mean, that's amazing. Well, I didn't do much with Hector other than being on this. We were on the downtown development. I think there was and also a Crohn's and colitis fundraising committee, and so like he was running one of the clubs, curling clubs up there at the time, and I think during that time period, I think he might have been dismissed from that, but I don't think he was playing it anymore. But no, we had good discussions, but I did spend lots of time with Rod. We golfed together, our wives, and we got together several times, and so I certainly miss not having him around.
So you saw him throw in his later years. Was he always the arrow, or at some point did it get a little crooked, or was he just?
He was pretty straight. He was pretty straight. I mean, he still played certainly 10 times better than I was at that stage, and I was playing third, and I probably shouldn't have been because my ability, and partly because I wasn't playing at all. Playing once a week or whatever it is, and did training practice rock for 10 years probably.
Do you throw it all now, or have you tried to stick, or do you have pretty much when's no nothing?
I played maybe about 5 years ago in the cystic fibrosis backfield that Dad was running, and that was my last time. And I go to Florida. I took to be leaving like 2 weeks from today to hit to Florida for 3.5, 4 months.
Yeah.
So I'm not around much of the training season, but as I get older, my balance isn't the same, and my delivery never was very good going flat-footed. So, I don't want to embarrass myself, so I kind of stay away.
I'll say this because I watched some of the video now that Mike Chernoff shared. I mean, you had a pretty awesome tuck delivery, though. I thought you had a really interesting slide. I mean, that's something to emulate. Of course, being a Manitoba boy growing up, it's funny. I ended up flat foot. Tuck didn't really work for me, but I always kind of wished I could have had a tuck slide. I don't know if I could admit it.
You could try hard. You could try the hard ones, that's for sure, because you keep out of the heck. And then the flip side of that is it made it very difficult on fast heights because just with speed, getting from the heck down to a tuck, you already get momentum going forward. So that's where it became an issue. What I would have to do is let go of it, instead of letting the rack near the hog line, I'd have to let go of it like at the T line, just so that I got the distance to go to travel by itself. And that doesn't produce great results, but sometimes it's the only thing that you can do to keep the rocks from going to the house.
So we've been chatting for 2.5 hours. Did you realize that, Bob? I don't know if you knew that.
My phone went dead. I had to go get a charger
Oh.
while we were talking.
Anything you think we missed, or anything that you wanted to add?
Well, just something that, because again, we were talking about curling ice and how terrible it can get. In '75, I think I mentioned it was probably our best year. Well, we get to the Nationals, and it was in Detroit, downtown Detroit, in the Cobo Hall, which is, big, massive hockey rink, basically, and entertainment rink or whatever. And we get there, first thing, we get there, and for practice, and there's like an inch of water on the ice.
Oh.
They weren't ready.
Yeah.
We had to wait for ice, and then they didn't have any professional curling ice makers. They just had the union guy that did ice for the hockey teams or whatever, and he put like an oil-based paint on. He painted the circles, and what happened is all that paint came to the surface, and so when you slide on the ice with your glove, your hand would get so sticky that you'd have to peel it off, just off your hand to be able to open your hand, and it got super slow. And your broom, we were using brooms back then, obviously '75, and it wouldn't recoil. It would, you'd swing it, it would stay in the. It wouldn't go back to the 12 o'clock. It would stick wherever it is.
Oh no!
So it was. I think the first couple of rounds, it might have been 100 people in an arena that's at 16,000 maybe, and it was just a joke. And we had a great year that year, and we ended up. It really wasn't. It was like playing NBA basketball on cinders. It was that bad, and it was kind of a slugfest, and we weren't able to adapt, and I think Washington ended up winning, and they had to cope with it too, but it was not pretty. It took a lot of the skill out of the game. So, but that's the only thing that also. Okay, with that, I think I got ahead to the lake. So
I do think so. I think you covered it all, Bob. You did a great job. I really enjoyed it. Thanks very much.
All right, thanks. Bye for now.